operational areas that we delve into in an
Undercover operatives in the supply chain. Well, joining us to speak about that today, Barry Brandman, President, Danbee Investigations. Barry, welcome.
Thank you, Russell.
Barry, we're speaking to each other, of course, at the WERC conference, and the folks at WERC came to you and asked you to put on a seminar based on the rather popular television show Undercover Boss. Well, what was that all about? Walk us through that.
I think what happened is that undercover by definition has always been a covert operation. It's not discussed out in the open very often. With the popularity of the TV show Undercover Boss, it brought to light how valuable that undercover intelligence can really be. Even CEOs that are very experienced and thought they had an excellent handle on what was taking place inside their respective companies were shocked at some of the things that they found by going undercover themselves. And I think to a certain degree it was a bit of an epiphany. What this did is generated conversation about the value of undercover intelligence to senior level executives. And of course, it's impossible for most executives to personally experience going undercover as portrayed on a TV show. However, we've been doing undercover investigations for CEOs for over 25 years, coming up with much the same type of intelligence. And when WERC found out about that, I think that it prompted them to come to us and ask me if I would speak at this conference.
Long years of working in these undercover positions in major companies, I might add. But let's walk through some of the reasons why a company comes to you and says, we need somebody to go undercover in our operation here. So walk us through that. Why would they do that?
Sometimes companies will come to us and they just want a general sense into how well their companies are being run. Is their management implementing the policies and practices that corporate has dictated? How is morale? Are there problems that they're not aware of that they should be? What about the level of productivity? That type of operational insight is important. And of course, they will also come to us if they suspect or know of some security-related concerns, such as individual theft, cybercrime, collusion, fraud, workplace substance abuse, theft of proprietary information, and a number of other issues. In that particular area, undercover has been extremely effective for the companies that we work with, and they found the intelligence to be extremely valuable.
It really then runs the gamut from things that are not at all serious, simply checking to see if certain operational objectives are being met or handled properly, to very serious security concerns then.
Well, I think that even the operational areas that we delve into in an undercover operation, many of our CEOs would maybe not necessarily label them as serious, but they would label them as directly tied into their company's productivity and profitability. So they do put a great deal of value on that operational intelligence, so much so that it's not unusual for them to keep our operatives in place for 5, 10, and even 15 years inside the same company.
Really?
Yeah, we've actually had operatives that have retired after 20 years working undercover. Now, true, they've transferred into different departments and sometimes taken on different positions and cover assignments, but many of our clients, I would say more than half of them, they really value the information where they keep those operatives long term because of that ongoing intelligence. Now, as far as the serious issues go, when you start to talk about security risks and threats, there's probably no better way to identify them than by having an inside perspective of an operative working as a regular employee who walks, talks, and acts just like everybody else, but they get to see that operation from a completely different perspective. And even CEOs who pride themselves on being hands-on individuals, knowing every facet of their company, are oftentimes shocked by the type of insight that they read in our confidential reports each week.
Let's go real world here for a minute, if we can. Is there an example, or are there some examples that you might give us of how an undercover operative has actually worked and with some of these security-related concerns?
Well, tomorrow during my seminar, I'm going to be showing a video that clearly shows, it's shot on the streets of New York City, and it shows thousands of dollars of stolen product being transferred from a truck driver's vehicle onto a waiting accomplice's van. And that started with the intelligence that was developed by an undercover operative working inside a distribution center as a loader. And after a few months, another worker confided in that operative that they had found a way to make thousands of dollars a week by overloading extra product and bypassing the company's systems, putting that product onto certain drivers' trucks who would sell it the next day during the course of their deliveries for cash, and then split the proceeds back 50%. That never would have come to light without that undercover operative's intelligence, and that was a problem that was costing that company between $10,000 and $15,000 a month in net loss. We had another investigation where we had a company that had come to us because they were concerned about an increase in workplace accidents, and they were also having a lot of damages done to their inventory. Wanted to know if they had a workplace substance abuse problem. They thought they did, but what puzzled them is that when they sent people to drug testing on their random procedures, very few of them ever failed the drug test. So on one hand, they suspected substance abuse. On the other hand, so many people tested positive that they thought that maybe that wasn't the issue. What our undercover investigator found out is that someone in HR was friendly with one of the warehouse people, who was one of the biggest drug users and dealers, by the way, and she was tipping him off when the company was about to conduct random drug testing. He would then disseminate that information to his buddies, and that's why the employees were coming up negative on a drug test. Once we started to conduct some drug tests without telling human resources the time that they were going to be performed, they ended up catching almost every employee on the first drug test and had them eliminated. In another investigation, we had uncovered purchasing kickbacks. Our operative had spoken with another employee working in a company that told her that one of the senior purchasing executives was taking expensive vacations on the tab of one of their major vendors, and she knew for a fact that that individual was receiving expensive gifts at his house. As we continued on that investigation, our operative was able to find that information out directly, and at one night over dinner with the purchasing executive, he even admitted that he was going on a vacation that was being paid for by the vendor, which was a definite violation of company policy. That prompted us to do more investigative work on the outside, and we eventually spoke with that purchasing agent. He admitted to taking kickbacks in addition to gifts, in addition to paid vacations, in return for inflated contracts he was giving this particular vendor. So those are just some of the examples of some of the security-related issues that Undercover typically brings to light and exposes.
I can only imagine what the heart palpitations were like for the CEOs and other C-suite officers upon learning about these things, and yet, of course, the sense of relief to now know what the deal was and what corrective action to take. Very final question: strategies that company executives need to keep in mind when they are considering working with an undercover operative. What would you say?
Well, the preface to your question is a very good point. Most of our clients, our C-level clients, by definition, are type A personalities, and that's why they're successful to begin with. So when they receive our reports and they see this type of information, in many cases their first inclination is to respond to the problem and repair it. And we explain to them that you're going to, in so many words, shoot yourself in the foot, metaphorically. You cannot instinctively react. Undercover needs to have patience. You need to take the information and understand that the first problem we uncover is probably not going to be the only problem that we find, nor the most significant problem that we expose. So patience is definitely a virtue. Sit back, let the undercover investigation unfold. There's no substitute for time. It really takes weeks, if not months, for an operative to naturally and gradually develop their rapport with their coworkers. Unlike what you see portrayed in movies, these operations don't run an hour and a half, 2 hours. They take a while, and the most successful ones run long term. So our operatives the first thing they need to understand is, if you read something in a report, sit back, digest it, and if necessary, we'll set up a conference call and have a strategy discussion with them and explain to them different ways that they could eventually respond to that information, but do it in such a way so that it doesn't cast suspicion on the operative and cause the information to dry up. The second thing to keep in mind is that you really want to keep the circle of people that are aware of the investigation as tight as possible. In some companies, there's a culture where they like to form a committee and have 8 people, 9 people involved with every major decision that's made. That's always a bad idea with Undercover, because the more people that learn about an undercover operation, the greater the likelihood that there's going to be an inadvertent breach somewhere down the line. So you want to keep that nucleus as tight as possible. In some companies, only the CEO or the CEO and a vice president are aware that this operation is actually taking place, and that's always the best way to do it. Even after we conclude an investigation, if we take an operative out of a company, we do it in such a way so that no one ever knows that that individual was actually an undercover operative. This way, should the company decide that they want to put another investigator undercover in the future, that investigator will not have a difficult time developing their cover report and becoming effective relatively quickly.
Barry, this is, I got to say, fascinating stuff. This is not 007 fiction, but this is real world stuff affecting real businesses, and terrific insight into what's going on there. Thank you so very much for finding time here at the conference to speak with us. Thank you.
Glad to be here, Russ. Thank you.
It's Barry Brandman, Danbee Investigation, speaking with us today about undercover operatives in your supply chain. Thank you for watching.